God designed restoration to transform you, not erase you. In Joel 2:25, God promises, "I will restore to you the years that the swarming locust has eaten." Notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say, "I will rewind time." Doesn't say, "I will pretend the locusts never came." He says, "Restore." Return what was lost through the devastation not around it. This is God's first revelation about second chances. They were never meant to be do-overs. They were meant to be transformations. And Psalm 51:12 confirms what restoration actually looks like. "Restore to me the joy of your salvation and uphold me with a willing spirit." David doesn't ask God to erase Bathsheba. Doesn't ask to go back to before the affair happened. He asks for joy restored on the other side of the failure, not instead of it. You felt the other version. The desperate prayer for God to let you try again. The bargaining, "If you just give me another chance, I'll get it right this time." The exhausting hope that somehow you can prove you've changed enough to deserve a reset. And Isaiah 43:18-19 shifts the frame entirely. "Remember not the former things, nor consider the things of old. Behold, I am doing a new thing." Not the same thing again. A new thing. God isn't in the business of replays. He's in the business of resurrection. There's a Hebrew word that changes how we understand restoration. The word shub-shuf. We translate it restore or return, but shuv doesn't mean restart. It means return to original design, like a river returning to its course after a flood. The flood happened, the banks eroded, but the river finds its way back, not as if the flood never happened, but through what it left behind. And in the New Testament, when Jesus restores Peter, the Greek word is katartizo. It's a fishing term. It means to mend nets, to repair what's been torn so it functions again, not as if it was never torn, but stronger at the breaking point. Restoration isn't erasure, it's transformation that carries the marks of the journey. But do you believe restoration works this way? Because most of us want God to hit the reset button, to let us try the same test again with the answer key this time, to give us back what we had before we ruined it. This is what God has been revealing all along. He doesn't give second chances at the same test. He gives new identities forged in the failure itself. When you understand Shuv and katartizo, when you see that restoration transforms rather than erases, everything shifts. Not into cheap grace, into genuine hope. Let me tell you about a man I know. He was a pastor, a good one. 15 years of faithful ministry. Wife, 3 kids, growing church. And then it all fell apart. An affair, not a moment of weakness, a 6-month relationship. When it came to light, everything collapsed. Marriage ended. Church removed him. The hardest part wasn't the consequences, he told me. It was knowing I'd become exactly what I'd preached against. He pauses. I kept waiting for my second chance. Spent 2 years in penance mode. Therapy. The steps. Proving I'd changed. And nothing happened. No church called. Just silence. This is where Shuv becomes liberating. Jeremiah 30:17. For I will restore health to you and your wounds. I will heal. Restore health. Not erase the wound. The wound happened, but health returns through healing, not around it. Psalm 23:3. He restores my soul. The Hebrew, is shuv nefesh. He returns my soul to its original design, to who I was meant to be before the wandering. That man leaned forward. So asking God to give me back my old life, I was asking for the wrong thing. Exactly. Shuv isn't about getting back what you had. It's about becoming who you were meant to be. And sometimes failure is the only path there. And katartizo makes it clearer. In Matthew 4:21, it describes James and John mending their nets. The nets were torn. The mending didn't pretend otherwise. It made them functional stronger at the repair. Galatians 6:1. If anyone is caught in transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him. Restore, katartizo, mend the torn place, not pretend it never tore. This is the first relief. God isn't waiting for you to prove you deserve another chance. He's offering transformation, meeting you in the failure and building something new. If that's landing somewhere, if you've been exhausted trying to earn back what you lost, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Watch how Scripture traces this pattern. Start with Jacob, Genesis 32. 20 years running from consequences. Deceived his father, stole his brother's blessing, built a life in exile. But now he has to face Esau. And the night before that meeting, he wrestles with God. All night, until his hip wrenches out of socket. At daybreak, God asks, "What is your name?" Jacob, which means deceiver. And God says, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, one who wrestles with God." God doesn't erase Jacob's past. Instead, he takes Jacob to the breaking point, literally breaks his hip, and gives him a new name. The text says, Jacob walked with a limp for the rest of his life. Every step reminded him of the night he was broken and renamed. That's shuv, not a fresh start. Transformation that carries the marks. This is why second chance theology falls short. It promises you can try again as if nothing happened. God offers something better, becoming someone new through what happened. Now, watch Moses. Exodus 3. 40 years earlier, he'd tried to deliver his people by his own strength. Killed an Egyptian, fled to the wilderness, spent decades tending sheep, then God shows up in a burning bush. "I'm sending you to Pharaoh." Moses' response, "Who am I that I should go?" Not confidence, questioning. Because the Moses who returns isn't the same Moses who fled. The first was confident, the second knows he can't do it alone. God doesn't restore Moses to his former confidence. He restores him to dependence. The 40 years weren't wasted, they made Moses capable. Not because he got better at leading, but because he got worse at trusting himself. This is the revelation. God's restoration transforms you into who you couldn't become without the failure. Moses' inadequacy became his qualification. Then there's Peter. John 21. After the resurrection, Peter's gone back to fishing. Jesus shows up and cooks breakfast by a charcoal fire, the same kind where Peter denied him. And Jesus asks 3 times, "Do you love me?" Once for each denial, but Jesus doesn't ask, "Will you do better?" He asks about love, relationship, identity. Each time Peter says yes, Jesus commissions him, "Feed my sheep." Jesus rebuilds Peter's calling on top of Peter's failure, not despite it. On top of it, Do you see the pattern? Jacob wrestling produced a limp and a new name. Moses' failure produced inadequacy that became strength. Peter's denial produced brokenness that became authority. God doesn't give second chances at the same test. He gives new identities forged in the failure. This is permission to stop trying to earn back your old life. God is offering transformation that carries your story into your calling. That man I mentioned 2 years into penance mode told me what finally broke open. I was listening to a sermon about Jacob, he says. The preacher said, God didn't restore Jacob to who he was before. He gave him a new name and a permanent limp. The limp was part of the restoration. He pauses. I pulled over and cried. I'd been asking God to erase the affair, to give me back what I had, but that wasn't what God was offering. His voice steadies. I realized I'd been asking for a second chance at the same life. God was offering transformation into a different person. Today he works at a recovery center, leads support groups for men struggling with infidelity. His story is the foundation of his ministry now. I'll never not be a man who had an affair, he told me. That's my limp, but it's also my testimony. When I tell men God can restore them, they know I'm not speaking theoretically. Here's what makes Catartizo so countercultural. We live in fresh start culture. We believe restoration means going back to how things were. Second chances mean erasing first failures, clean slates. So we hide our failures, rebrand ourselves, move where nobody knows our story, and we miss what God offers. Mending at the torn place, strength where we broke. Identity forged in failure, not despite it. Fresh start culture says failure disqualifies you. Catartizo says failure might be what qualifies you. If these videos shift how you see failure and restoration, subscribe. We're going deeper into theology that changes how we live. I learned this when I realized I'd been asking God for the wrong thing. After my own significant failure, I prayed for erasure. Let me go back. Let me try again. A mentor finally said, what if God's silence isn't rejection? What if he's waiting for you to stop asking for a reset and start asking what he wants to build from here? I stopped trying to earn back my old identity and started letting God forge a new one with the failure as part of the foundation. This is permission to stop hiding your limp. It might give you authority to speak into someone else's darkness. So what does what God means by second chances reveal about his character? This God isn't a teacher giving makeup exams. He's a father who walks into the rubble and says, I can build something here. Not despite this, because of this. When Joel promised to restore what the locusts ate, he revealed, restoration doesn't erase devastation. It redeems it. The locusts came. The years were lost. And God brings fullness on the other side, not by rewinding, but by rebuilding. When Jacob received a new name and a limp scripture revealed, transformation carries marks. The limp wasn't leftover curse, it was proof of encounter. Evidence of wrestling. Part of the restoration, not residue from before it. When Moses returned inadequate, God revealed, failure can become qualification. The man who couldn't trust himself was exactly the man God could use. His weakness was the point, not the obstacle. When Jesus met Peter at a charcoal fire, he revealed God takes you back to the place of failure, not to shame you, but to show you he was there the whole time, working something you couldn't see. The question isn't, can you prove you deserve another chance? It's, will you let me transform this failure into the foundation of who you're becoming? This changes how you approach your past. You can stop trying to erase it. God offers redemption, not erasure. And redemption is better because it doesn't pretend the story didn't happen. It makes the story mean something. You can stop waiting for permission to try again. God isn't holding failure against you. He's building with it. The rubble isn't punishment, it's raw material. You can believe your limp might be your testimony, that the very thing you're most ashamed of could become the thing that gives you authority to speak into someone else's darkness. That man I mentioned, he now trains other counselors in recovery work. We only hire people with stories, he told me, because people in crisis can smell theory. They need someone who's walked through the fire, someone with a limp who kept walking. Kingdom multiplication, not through perfection, through transformation, not despite the failure, because of what God did with it. Here's what this means for you. You can stop asking God to let you try the same test again. He's not offering that. He's offering something better. You can stop believing failure disqualified you. It might be exactly what qualified you for what comes next. You can trust that shove, return to original design, includes the journey. And katartizo mending makes you stronger at the broken place than you ever were before it tore. You are not your failure, but you're not who you were before it either. You're becoming someone new, forged in the fire, mended at the tear, walking with a limp that proves you've wrestled with God and didn't let go until He blessed you. And that version of you, that's the one God has been working toward all along. Not the version that never failed, the version that failed and was transformed. Tonight, if you're carrying a failure you think disqualified you, instead of asking, will God give me another chance? Ask, what does God want to build from here? This week, practice katartizo thinking day 1-2. Identify the failure you've been trying to erase. Name it honestly, not to wallow, but to see clearly. Day 3-4. Read Genesis 32:22-32. Jacob wrestled, was renamed, limped. The limp and the blessing came together. Day 5-6. Ask, what authority does my failure give me that perfection never could? Who can you speak to because of where you've been? Day 7. Notice if anything shifted, not circumstances' perspective. Is there capacity to see your story as foundation instead of disqualification? And when the shame returns, remember Jacob walking with a limp bearing a new name. Remember Moses returning inadequate, leading a nation. Remember Peter at a charcoal fire rebuilt into an apostle. Your failure isn't the end. It might be where your real story begins. If this changed how you see failure, share it. Someone is carrying shame they think disqualified them. Someone is waiting for erasure when God is offering transformation. God doesn't give second chances at the same test. He gives new identities forged in the failure itself. Shuf, katartizo, return, mending, not erasing the tear, transforming it into testimony, not hiding the limp, walking with it into your calling. That's the God of second chances, and it's so much better than what you were asking for, because you don't need a reset, you need a resurrection, And the God who raises the dead, he's standing in your rubble right now. Not to remind you what you lost, to show you what he's building. Welcome to restoration.